Operation Enduring Freedom is the longest fought war in American history. The war in Afghanistan began in 2001 and is still going on in 2016.
Terrorists located in Afghanistan were using this country as a base of operations to formulate plans to attack us. On September 11, over 2,000 Americans were killed by terrorists following orders by Osama bin Laden, leader of Al-Qaeda.
President George W. Bush, along with the leaders of 43 other countries, allied to fight terrorism at its source.
In addition to our regular military, the National Guard forces were called upon to fight this war. In this time of modern warfare, why would a person volunteer?
I've always had that sense of wanting to be in the military, even coming up through middle school and high school. Just being a part of something that's bigger than me, kind of, so to speak. Plus, with being in the Guard, I can do both civilian and military and still help my community out.
Well, obviously National Guard is local. It was easy for me to maintain my civilian career at the time and also serve the country that I pretty much destined to do anyway. It's in my genes, it's in the blood. On my father's side, I'll just go down the list, just kind of give you an idea of my mentality. My father's dad was a World War II vet in the Navy, served on a carrier. He had some pretty awesome stories before he passed away. Then I got his two older brothers who were also in the Navy. Then my dad was in the Army, and his youngest brother was in the Air Force, and also retired from Coast Guard. And on my mama's side, her daddy was in the Marines. Her oldest brother was in the Navy, in the sub. He has a lot of funny stories. And then her youngest brother was also in the Army. And then you got myself, my younger brother, and two cousins. One currently in the Navy in Africa at the time.
With the 12 years breaking service, when I wanted to go back into the service, I was a little bit too old to go back into the Marine Corps. So I went into the Army National Guard. One, I could go into the officer corps, because in the Marine Corps I was in the enlisted corps. Two, I could help serve my community and be in the military to finish out my 20 years.
Basic training could be difficult, but was an important element to prepare soldiers for war.
Parris Island, South Carolina. That was Marine Corps boot camp. It was pretty rough. It was 16 weeks long. Probably one of the roughest boot camps in all the services that the military has. Afghanistan was pretty much like a desert. If you've been to Texas, it's almost very similar to Afghanistan. That's the reason why when we did our training to go over to war, they took us to Texas so we could climatize ourselves.
Fort Benning, Georgia, Sand Hill. It was hot, middle of summer. It was pretty tedious, but what benefited me was going after the Citadel. So like I know my bunk mate, with my battle buddy, that's what they call it. He at first had even confided to me that he thought I was a little arrogant because I didn't really stress out over the little things like making the bed and different things. And then when he found out that I went to the Citadel and I've been making my bed for 4 years, he understood why I wasn't as stressed out as he was. But yeah, I went there. I went through 2 different drill sergeants. They were, you know, probably the best I could have asked for. I was platoon guy the entire time. A lot of marching, a lot of route marching. The tedious stuff was on weekends when you had to sit around and pick grass or leaves with your hands. But definitely I left basic training in shape. I ran my best 2 miles of my life. I run it in 12:45 at the time. I don't think I'll ever do that again. You know, but the marching and all that stuff I had learned at Citadel. So really the best part for me was being able to fire all the weapons, the M16, the Solid 240, stuff like that. So I really enjoyed it.
Responsibilities during the war matched individual abilities and skills, allowing the military to function more efficiently.
I'm originally an air defense officer, so but I deployed with the 122nd Engineer Battalion, so they're engineers, and they're everything from horizontal engineers, vertical engineers, maintenance detachment types.
In the Marine Corps, I started out as a motor transportation specialist, and then I moved into the logistics aspects of it, worked in the warehouse. That was when I was in the Marine Corps, and then When I came into the National Guard, I became a combat engineer, demolition expert, where we would blow stuff up. I'm still classified as a combat engineer, but as an officer, I'm an engineer officer where I can do horizontal engineering, vertical engineering, combat engineering, things of those roles.
Our soldiers faced harsh conditions in Afghanistan.
We were stationed on Bagram Airfield, which there were two major airfields in Afghanistan. One was Mazar Sharif and the other one was Bagram. We stayed there. Concrete buildings. It was almost like be like your gymnasium. It was just an open building, restrooms on one side. The rest of it was open, and it was bunks, just a bunch of bunks. And that's where we stayed for 8 months.
You have to constantly watch out your windows for the bad guys putting what they call magnetic IEDs on your vehicle. And I got pictures you can see out the window that you don't know who your enemies are. And even if they are your enemy, just because they don't shoot you then doesn't mean they won't shoot you later. So
some of our route clearance companies, they were the ones that go out and look for the IEDs, the improvised explosive devices, homemade bombs. They had a lot of run-ins with those. They found a lot of them. Luckily, we did not lose anybody from those companies. My battalion that was over them, we took over 265 people, I believe, and we brought them all back, which was a good thing. IEDs was a big thing over there, and on our base every day the enemy would shoot in mortars. Basically it's like a little grenade. It comes out of a tube, it just shoots up and comes back down and explodes. So those came in daily, nightly. I do remember one incident where we had roughly 13 to 15 of the mortars coming in all at one time. That was pretty rough.
This war was the first in American history to employ women in strategic combat areas. Women in our military were subject to many cultural discriminations.
And we had women in the engineers with the 122nd stationed at Bagram that were there working. But for the training team members that were going to train the Afghan army soldiers, we were not allowed to have women on our teams.
The Afghan culture made joint military actions difficult.
This woman right here, she was his translator. We were approached immediately. They did not want a woman discussing their faith to the male soldiers. And so we had to ask her to go back out, with one of our guards and sit. And she understood it. She did. She figured it would happen. She said sometimes they allow her to do it and sometimes they didn't. But this chain of command did not want a female talking to them, especially to the males, about their faith. So I had to ask my personal interpreter to translate for him.
Our troops had technological equipment to help them succeed in their missions.
We had specialized trucks over there. They're all up-armored to protect us from the homemade bombs, the IEDs. And they find the IEDs for us. So our trucks, specialized trucks, have arms on them, long arms that could dig and delicately unearth a bomb. Once we did find one, we could send robots out to look at it, a explosive charge on it to get rid of it, or the EOD, if they were available, would come out and they would go out there in their suits and blow them up. Generally, we like to use the robots. That way, no human contact comes within, those IEDs.
Military families were subject to great sacrifices.
Well, number one, we volunteer when we enlist. And I've always said I would never volunteer to go to deployment, but if my country asked me to go with orders, then I'm going to go. And that's what I did. Whether you're a combat veteran, if you serve 2 years or you serve 4 years, it's just a sacrifice. Even in National Guards, people say we're part-time. Yeah, we're part-time, but I don't choose when my drills are, and I don't choose when I go to AT, and I didn't choose to go to Afghanistan. So you miss birthday parties. I miss somebody's death. You miss, playing ball. Miss all that. I miss Brock's first steps. I was gone. I returned home and I picked my boy up from the nursery. And I went to go see my wife and she said, "Put him down." I put him down. He walked away from me and went to her. You miss all that. So it's the sacrifices that you put up with. You know, whether they go, whether they don't go. If they have the orders to go, they go. If they don't, then they don't. And you may go and their job might be to be a fireman, might be a cook in the DFAC of Afghanistan. They might never even hold a pistol, but they do what their country told them to do, and that's their job. And I just ask that, you know, hey, if you don't respect them for nothing else, just respect them for the sacrifice.
Friendships among soldiers help them cope with wartime stresses.
I really just got into the groups, and trust me, when you work and get through stressful situations with other people, and you develop what they call like a light mindset, and you know, you're a lot of athletes say we bleed together, we sweat together, we cry together. That's the mentality from the military. So we go through all, and we get cussed out together, and different things from our superiors, and we train together and we sweat together during PT. And the guys are great. Luckily, most of them were about my age, within the mid-30s, and most of us have families and wives or husbands and children at home. And so we had a lot of stories. We did a lot of cookouts together. It just building that relationship, that bond. And again, now if I were to leave the air defense community, I would transfer to the engineer, especially the 122nd, in a heartbeat. And I'm Facebook friends with them. I email them all the time and talk to them all the time.
In arriving home, those sacrifices were set aside as soldiers and their families were reunited.
We could see the lights, we could hear everybody inside the building. And of course, military, we're forming up, and nobody really can hold back any tears and excitement from going in the hangar. So the door opens up, everybody's there with the flags, and you see your kids, and you can't go get them because you can't leave the formation. And I want to go hug my kids, I couldn't. But as soon as you get in, and they you know, said the little Army song and everything else, we marched in. They were.
For the sacrifices they've made to keep all of us safe from terrorists, we owe a great debt to our soldiers and their families.
If you have an interest in the military, go for it. I think it'll help you out longer in your life and whatever you want to pursue. If you don't, please support the military.
God first, and then family, and then country.